If you've been creating web applications without a framework, there's a strong chance you've been recreating elements unnecessarily and wasting time. There's also a possibility that you might have been accidentally adding in security flaws. Joining us to discuss this is leading training CTO and senior developer with over 20 years of experience. Welcome, Ryan. How's it going, Ryan?
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be with you today.
Tell me a bit about how you got into development.
I studied computer engineering at Swan University of Technology. I then joined a web development company in 1999, where I began my journey in back-end web development. I had to learn to work with several web technologies, including HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. Being a back-end developer also meant learning about databases and how to interact with them using SQL. I also became very familiar with setting up Linux servers for website hosting. Around 2001, I began training companies in these various technologies and managing the IT infrastructure for leading training. In the last 5 years, my main focus has shifted back to my roots of back-end web development. I mostly write web-based applications to automate business workflows using a web application framework called Laravel, which is written in PHP.
What are the benefits of using a web application framework?
A web application framework provides a standard way to build a web application by promoting the reuse of code and good programming practices. Any web application has many standard components. For example, a login system, a way to interact with the database, and a templating system. Instead of reinventing the wheel by building each of these components for each new application, we use a web application framework to remove much of this overhead. If a developer leaves a company, another developer who knows the same web application framework can easily find their way around the project code and get up to speed. Another advantage to using a framework is improved security. The framework developers have spent much time perfecting and testing each of the components, such as authentication and authorization, meaning you get the same security in your applications. Many applications have security vulnerabilities, just because developers have tried to implement their own authentication systems, instead of using a tried and tested framework.
You've said you use a PHP framework called Laravel. Why PHP and why Laravel?
PHP is a server-side scripting language, very similar in syntax to JavaScript. It's relatively easy to learn, but also powerful and efficient. It's also open source, so you don't have to worry about licensing costs. Usually you would learn PHP before learning any of the frameworks. There are several other web application frameworks for PHP, but Laravel is currently the most popular and probably the easiest to learn. There are currently more than 1 million web applications built with Laravel. It's open source, so there are thousands of developers who contribute to the code, meaning improvements are continuously being made. Laravel makes common backend tasks easy. For example, sending emails, querying a database, data validation, caching, file management, and authentication. Laravel uses the MVC pattern, which is short for Model View Controller.
Can you tell me more about what MVC involves?
MVC involves separating the data model from the user interface from the business rules. The model represents the dynamic data structure, the view represents the user interface, and the controller handles the business rules. This makes everything more modular and easier to reuse code. Multiple interfaces can also be created without affecting the business logic or the data model.
I've heard of Laravel Livewire. How does this differ from Laravel?
Modern web applications use JavaScript-based libraries and frameworks to build reactive dynamic interfaces. These interfaces include reusable components such as data tables and search boxes. The advantage of these components is they allow small portions of the page to refresh without affecting the rest of the page. Many websites make use of JavaScript frameworks such as React or Angular to create these components. Laravel Livewire is a library written for Laravel, which makes it possible to create your own dynamic components on the server side using none to very little of your own JavaScript. Livewire takes care of writing the necessary JavaScript for you.
Could you give an example of some of these dynamic components?
You could take a data table, for example. Data tables display data using rows and columns in a dynamic way. It usually has some kind of search and sort feature. As a user types their query into a search box, the table is redrawn, displaying only the results that match the search criteria. Each column represents a field. Clicking a column heading will sort the results by that field. clicking the same heading again, or reverse the sort order. This all takes place without refreshing the entire page. This is made possible by means of AJAX requests made to the server.
Thanks, Ryan. I think that helps to clarify a lot of these concepts. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. It was great to be with you today.
So, if you're a PHP developer who isn't using Laravel, perhaps this has given you an indication of why you should.